Welcome to Strategy Sessions by Thirsty Bandit Consulting, Episode 23, Collaboration.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. This is Corey Kraychek, and I'm here with Rachel Brown for another episode of Strategy Sessions. Rachel Brown, happy Friday. How you doing?
Doing okay. Gonna go drink wine later and sit outside and have a cheese board. So looking up right now.
Wine plus cheese board plus weekend is an equation for fun. Always.
Yeah.
I
That's a
think,
pretty solid lineup for my night.
yeah. Hey, how did you do in algebra? Did you do well in algebra?
I think you should know me well enough by now to know the answer to that question. I graduated with an English degree, so no, algebra and I were not great friends.
Likewise. So, folks, if you're joining the podcast for us to break down sort of what's new and hot in the math world, this is probably not the podcast for you, because I pretty much topped out at like 4th or 5th grade math. Like once my kids got past 5th grade, I'm like, well, wife, you gotta figure this out. So our kids even know now. Like they don't even come to me. They like circumnavigate around me and just go directly to Gretchen and be like, I need help with this.
Man, I wish I had a Gretchen for math growing up. That would have been solid. Just like, how old am I? 35. I'm just, 20 years too late. But
I know. But I mean, that doesn't mean that I can't still use an equation analogy, because at least I know what that is. But that's gonna be we're topping out the math talk. That's it. We're done with that, because it's Friday and I don't want to think about math, quite frankly. So but you know what? It's an interesting segue, Rach. Because when we think about equations, right?
sure.
And we think about the topic for today, 1 + 1 sometimes can equal 2 or maybe 3 or 4 when you're talking in terms of collaboration. And so I always think that collaboration and strategic partnerships really can amplify brand. It can amplify reach. It can amplify the message that you're trying to get across, and ultimately, right, it can also amplify sales if we really focus in. I mean, that's really the purpose, right? I mean, you try to partner with people either that are adjacent to your industry or like-minded, and in many cases maybe not even related to your industry, in the efforts to get the word out there and try to get eyes on your product and your brand, and then hopefully sell more and be more profitable. And so today's guest, they've really built this super intriguing model, because their whole premise is built on collaboration, but they do it in these really unique ways. And this is actually our second take for this podcast. We had some technical difficulties the first go around, and so we're super happy for them to join us again today. So with that, Sydney Welch of the Maker's Table is here today. Sydney,
hey,
hello again. How are you?
Again.
Yeah, I think you guys were taking the podcast from Artemis 2 last time, so we just
it.
yeah. that it'd be better for us to reshoot this so anybody following closely along. This is episode 23. We had a kind of a gap in our podcast, and we went 22 to 24, which again, I'm bad at math, but I know how to count in sequential order. But Sydney and her co-owner Alex run this really incredible business called the Maker's Table, and I am not going to do it justice if I try to explain what it is. So I think I'd like to start maybe just in your own words, Sid. What was the impetus behind Maker's Table, and what are you guys working on that makes you so uniquely positioned to talk about today's topic, which is collaboration?
I love it. I've talked to so many people literally today where I was like, here's our really long elevator pitch. So I feel like I was primed for this and got some practice in today. But my background is in art history, and I specifically focused my studies on the Italian Renaissance, which inspired me to write my book, which is called The Art of Collaboration. So I wrote a book about it, so I feel like it's okay for me to speak on it. And then my business partner, Alex, who couldn't join us today, her background is in event styling and photo shoot styling and all things design. And so Alex and I met at a dinner party that I was hosting, and she reached out to me a little bit after that and asked if I would be interested in starting this dinner party concept with her, which is what has now evolved into the maker's table. So the initial concept, which we still largely operate as, is everyone who's a guest at the dinner makes or contributes something for the event. So a florist might do the flower arrangements, a ceramicist making plates, a chef contributing a course, a mixologist making a drink pairing, musicians performing or curating a playlist, graphic designers designing the menus. Like, you could go on and on, right, with what people might contribute to make a dinner party successful. And that was kind of what we are and have been really well known for. And that kind of started shifting about a year ago when we had some brands start reaching out and asking us to produce their marketing and influencer and launch events. And so we realized that we were really uniquely positioned to execute super cool events because, unlike a typical event agency or something, we had hundreds of people at our fingertips who could do things. And so rather than just having one team in house, it's really just Alex and I, and we bring on people from our dinners as freelancers anytime we're working with an event, so we can really tailor the creatives and what we're offering each brand to them by cherry picking the right creatives who we've met and already had dinner with. So we know them, we know what their work is like, we've tried their food, we've experienced their art, and we've actually just met them. And that's like a huge piece of the puzzle there, is knowing what their personality is like and how they like to work and how we like to work with them. So kind of have two things going on where we are this dinner party community thing, which is really beautiful. And then we also have this kind of agency side where we can produce events, which is really fun. Um, and the second part, I think you just asked, like, what's something we're working on right now? I think for Alex and I, we're trying to figure out a way to really explain this to people, because I think it just takes a lot of words and it takes a lot of hand holding through the concept. And so I think we're working on getting our website finalized and just trying to have a clear explanation of all the things that have to do with the maker's table and fall under the maker's table. And so that's not like that's more of like a broad like thing, but we're trying to make it so that people can really understand who we are and what we're doing and what we care about, so that we don't have as much resistance when we're inviting people to work with us.
No, it makes sense. I mean, unfortunately, collaboration is just one of those words that's constantly used, right? In the creative industry and outside of that. And I think it means so many different things in practice. So for you to hone in on specifically what collaboration is through the lens of the maker's table is really, really important, right? I think especially when you're trying to show a value proposition to a prospective partner, or just trying to get them to hear out your pitch. So when you do that, and as you're tweaking and adjusting the web presence and how you're communicating to the outside world for awareness build, how do you presently define it, and why do you think that the maker's table can make it meaningful rather than just sort of transactional in nature?
Yeah, I think I talk a lot about this. Alex and I do all the time. I feel like people are using collaboration to take advantage of things and people and opportunities, and it's sort of like not collaborative at all. And we've had this too, where people are like, "We want to collaborate with you, so you can do all the work, and we'll take all the credit." And it's like, "Oh, that's not really a collaboration at all." So I tend to define it as when both parties are benefiting in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be even, but it has to be like an opportunity for both people to have a benefit. And so if someone is not benefiting, I don't really think it's collaborative, because that just means you're probably not paying someone for something that you should be paying them for. Um, but I also think it's when everyone's like investing in it. So for our dinners, at least, every person, like, you can't come to the dinner unless you find some way to contribute. And so we feel really comfortable calling them a collaborative experience because every single person has invested time and thoughtfulness into it. And the sharing of that contribution is what forms like the whole experience. And so it's really meant that everyone has to do something. So again, if you're calling something a collaboration, but one party's not actually doing anything, it's probably not a collaboration. You've probably just slapped someone's name onto your work, which that might serve a purpose in different points in your career, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's collaborative. I think that's more like name sharing. I don't know exactly what you want to call it, but yeah, I think both parties have to benefit and both parties have to do something is probably the simplest way to boil that down.
And that's really I love this idea. I just like think this is so fascinating. And the first time we talked, I remember being so fascinated by this because you get to watch this kind of like unfold around you. But like for you guys too, like this is a very intentional thing. Like your guest list is curated, it's invite only. Everybody has something to contribute. So I can imagine that you and Alex are probably like mad scientists behind the scene, like moving people around, right? Like trying to do this. So your level of intention of making something like this is incredible. So like what role does that intentionality, I guess, like go into playing of the success of your dinners? And then like you bring all these people together, they have different disciplines, like it changes the idea of projects and like the relationships that emerge. Like it's just a really cool process like across the board. So like how do you do all of this? Like I like truly it's really cool to think about.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot to us. We do put a lot of work in. Um, there's a lot of pieces to the each dinner feels like its own project. So I was about to say there's a lot of pieces to the project. So I think the first piece is like the curated guest list is really important. There's a great book called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, and she talks a lot about um exclusion doesn't have to be mean. It can actually be a kindness. And so when we're scheduling our dinners and thinking about the theme and what we want the vibe to be, it's really important to put the right people in the room together. And sometimes certain people shouldn't be in the room. And it's not because there's anything wrong with them or that they're not amazing or talented or smart or all the great things you could say. They just don't fit for that reason, right? So the thought process behind it being invite only is that we can really curate who's in the room and make sure that it makes sense and that everyone has something to offer to the concept itself, to one another. Everyone has something to benefit from being there. And if we just sort of made it like an open ticket and we had no idea who was coming, we would lose control of that curation. And it's really important to us that it's curated because that's what makes it special. There's tons of amazing networking events in Philly where anyone can go, and we go to those too and we love them, but that's not what the Makers Table is. And so we have an application process so you can sign up, let us know what you want to do, why you want to come, what you're looking for right now in your career. And then we do our best to fit people into the dinners. And then the other piece of that curation is I make meticulous seating charts that I'm very picky about and I think very deeply about. And so there's so many factors that go into my decisions behind the seating charts. And sometimes there is a component of randomness, but I try to think about people's personalities. So Alex and I usually get on a call with every single person before they come to a dinner. So that alone is like a ton of work. And then from those calls, we have a little bit of a gauge on people's personalities and what they're excited about and interested in. And so I try to put people who might be more reserved or shy or introverted around people who are more outgoing and friendly to help them be brought out of their shell. I also think about the logistics of like the chefs at the dinner might have to be getting up more frequently. So I try to put them on the ends so that they're not disrupting the whole table. So there's like logistic pieces that go into it. I try to not have business partners sitting next to each other because when you sit next to someone, you tend to like turn in. And so I try to put them across from each other so the people on the sides can like be brought in versus like closed out. So there's all these things that I'm always thinking about. And so we usually end up with a really fun seating chart. And I've had so many people say like, did you sit me here on purpose? And I'm like, yes, of course I sat you there on purpose. So it's always really satisfying for me personally when people make a great connection with someone they're seated next to or across from or whatever. But then there's also the piece of like people do just meet at the dinners organically through mingling, and we have some opportunities where you're not just seated the whole time. And so I think in terms of curating the group, those are some of the really key elements is like making sure we only invite people who feel like they would work and then seating them intentionally as well.
Are you a tactile person? I mean, do you have a physical seating chart or do you do it all digitally? Like I envision like this gigantic board, right? Where you're like moving chairs around. You have like
I'm a
people's heads.
notebook girl for
Six.
sure, but I usually do sticky notes because I like to move them around. So I'll
Right.
kind of start with my initial thoughts and then I'll look for some of those like logistical red flags. I'm like, oh, I put this chef right in the middle. That's probably not going to work for them. Let me move them to the side. Okay, now what else did I mess up? So I tend to do sticky notes and then I'll actually usually sticky note the name to the seat or the plate. So then whoever's placing the name cards can then just pick them up and put those down instead. So sticky notes are my favorite. I also, this is kind of a tangent, but when I was writing my book, I intentionally wrote the chapters so that they could all be read individually. Like they didn't necessarily have to go sequentially. So I had written them all kind of as individual pieces of writing. But then when I had to put them in order, I had a bunch of sticky notes with all the chapters and I was moving them around. So I love a sticky note. It's like I always have them in my purse.
Yep. Yep. No, I agree. I agree. Sticky notes. We go through a ton of sticky notes at home here. Hey, shout out to Post It, for the work that they've done. But it's, I think again, when you can visualize it and you're able to see in front of you the strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities that each of those people afford one another, it really gives you the insight that you need to make the placements where they go. Again, for me, I'm a visual person just by nature, so I don't think I would be able to do it if I was just like working off of like a Word document or shooting emails back and forth with Alex, being like, well, what do you think if we sit so and so? Like I would need to physically see it up on a board. I mean, it's like high stakes like wedding seating, really.
Yeah,
Right.
that's such a great, that's a funny way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk. I mean, we alluded to sort of the darker underbelly of collaboration a few minutes ago, right? Where folks are, you get pitched all the time on, hey, you should collaborate or partner with us. It'll give you great exposure, blah, 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 blah. We've all heard it. And especially for Rachel and I, with the years of experience we've had in the wine industry, more often than not, a partnership basically just meant like, we just want free product. We just want free wine. You may or may not get good exposure. There may or may not be a marketing ROI, but we're going to call you a partner because we need the wine and we don't want to spend money on the product to begin with. And so that is, I think, the slippery slope, right? That is the
Sure.
challenge that all of us have been presented with, trying to weigh the value against the give. And even though I think there are so many industries that value collaboration, I do think that when it boils down to it, a lot of times they're very protective, right? So like they may want your product or service to be present in their place, but then they worry about how it could potentially compete against something that they're doing or something that someone else is doing in the room, right? And so I think it's natural for people sometimes to want to operate in silos. And so what I think is fascinating, and I know a lot of times you select people that are doing very different things from very different areas so that you're not running into maybe a potential overlap. But have you learned sort of any tricks of the trade to encourage the conditions to be in a way that makes collaboration work, even for people that have absolutely nothing to do with one another? And they're sitting there saying like, why are we sitting here next to one another? I do this and you do this. We can't see how this works.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to think how to like be concise, but I don't know if that's possible. So um
We got
well,
time.
I'll tell a story. Yeah, I'll tell a story about from our first dinner. I tell this story all the time. They're probably sick of me mentioning them at this point, but we sat two people next to each other who I sat them next to each other because of personality. So, Eric, who is a puzzler, he designs and creates puzzles. He's really cool. He is a little more introverted, and I knew that about him, and he's fantastic. I really love him, but he's more shy and reserved. And so I was thinking like, who should I put him next to? He doesn't know a lot of people at the dinner. Um, so I sat him across from a gentleman who I knew he was friends with, but I don't like putting friends next to each other because that's boring. So I said, okay, I'll put him in proximity to a friend. And then Alex, who owns Citrine Tablescaping Company, she rents out like dinnerware for parties and weddings and all sorts of things like that. She's incredible. She's so friendly and warm and has this very inviting and like she's not in your face outgoing the way that I am. Like I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" She's just very warm and friendly. So I thought they would match really well cuz I can overwhelm shy people sometimes. So I thought, okay, she's the right match for Eric's personality, and they actually ended up during that dinner coming up with the idea of an escape room dinner party and did it. And so Alex kind of did all the design for it. Eric created the escape room piece, and then they hired the chef from the first dinner as well to be the chef for that. So that's just a really great example of two people who I didn't sit next to each other because I thought they were going to create an escape room dinner party, that's for sure. I thought their personalities would complement each other nicely, and then they ended up having this really cool collaborative project, and I think they did multiple runs of it. So I want to say they did like 2 or 3 of the escape room dinner parties, which is so cool. So that's kind of one of my favorite stories because it also happened at the very first dinner. So it was this like total proof of concept for Alex and I that felt really satisfying. Um, and then the other piece of just like the reason we curate the dinner is we don't want 17 photographers in the room, not because there's any problem with that. It's because like that's a little boring. Like we want you to meet someone who does something totally different from you, where you can imagine something like an escape room dinner party happening that you've never thought of before. But because you're seated next to someone who does something so removed from you, it's like, how could we possibly connect or intersect? And if you're just with a photographer, it's like, hey, let's shoot together. And that is great, and you should. But we are kind of looking for something a little bit bigger, a little bit more like unique than that. And so we try really hard to have only a couple people overlapping, so that there's this like more expansive opportunity for collaboration. And that's kind of part of the reason we curate the guest list so meticulously. And there's also a component of that where we just don't really believe in competition. It's not our vibe. And we just squash that. So if someone is coming in with a competitive energy, like that's going to get squashed right away. We just don't, no one is your competitor. There's plenty of business to go around. There's plenty of creativity to go around. Alex and I don't feel like we invented dinner parties. We think everyone should be hosting dinner parties in their industries and doing this, and we want to help people succeed. And so, um, but we know that if you're in a room with 17 people who do the same thing as you might feel at least a little bit of like competitive or insecurity or something. So we try really hard to make it that no one in the room could really be positioned as your competitor. And we think that also helps people be a little more confident and bold and kind of explore what's possible.
I think that that's probably one of the coolest elements to this is that as you're thinking through who your guest list is and you're continuously moving around the seating chart. I mean, I'm sure it's human nature for you to think, well, this person will match with this person in a way, and maybe they can work on something that's kind of like this. The puzzle example is a great one because you're just looking at the individuals, the skills, and sort of who they are as a person, and then just letting the magic happen, right? I think the magic, if you distill it all down, is what makes the Maker's Table so unique because they are the ones coming up with the ways that they will collaborate with themselves after this dinner is done. And so I think it's really neat to be surprised every time that something has come together in a way that you never imagined it to.
Yeah, it is. It's fun to be surprised. And I think Alex and I, there's only so much in your control, but we just really hope that people are coming with an open mind. That's why we get on a call with them ahead of time to make sure they understand who we are, what we're about, what the vibe is. So everyone has like spoken to one of us before they've arrived, and it just helps everyone come in with the right energy. Um, and I just thought of while you were saying that, I saw this, it was like an Instagram reel or something, but this man was talking and he said, um, something about it was kind of about like creating your own luck and like lucky people and like how are you so lucky all the time. And he was saying it's not so much about like having this like energy that just comes to you all the time because you're so actually lucky. It's usually people who put themselves out there and create a big surface area to receive opportunity. And so I like to think of the Maker's Table as being one of those spaces where you're putting yourself out there. There's people you've never met. You have no idea what to expect, but it's a place where your surface area for opportunity is really large because there's 20 new people in the room who are doing all sorts of different things. And so, um, it's very cool for Alex and I to sort of create that luck for people where by bringing them into the same room, they can just go on to do what they want. And we're hands off with that. Like if you meet someone at the dinner, we want to hear how it went because we're so curious and excited, but we don't like micromanage those relationships at all. It's very independent. So we are sort of like, you're here. What you do with being here is on you. So
Honest follow-up to that though, okay? Glass of wine in, a glass and a half of wine in, collaborative juices really start to flow at that point. Usually, is that typically how it goes?
We have had some dinners where we don't serve alcohol. So it depends. We've had some dinners where I did get the feedback that there may have been too much alcohol. It's always a balancing act. I'm not a drinker, so I feel very comfortable like not having alcohol and socializing without it. Some people love having some liquid courage mixed in for the evening. So we try not to have too much alcohol because we don't want it turning into like a rowdy situation or people feeling embarrassed or like, oh no, did I drink too much? So we're still kind of figuring that out. But yeah, I have noticed a glass or two of wine usually gets the volume in the room a little louder. People are moving around a bit more. So we always welcome a cocktail when it makes sense for the evening. But yeah, when we started off, I was like, maybe we need to have a little less.
We're getting a little too collaborative at this
We're
point.
getting
Maybe
too
let's-
collaborative.
Oh yeah, that's so funny.
I just like I'm just trying to think of this from like an outside perspective of just like how cool it has to be to watch this like unfold in front of you. Like, and I think too, like to your point of having 17 photographers in the room, like there is maybe some of that kind of like comparison, but I don't know if it necessarily pushes you out of your comfort zone, like sitting next to somebody that doesn't do what you do. And I think it's a good reminder to anybody in a field that like maybe reaching out a little bit past your purview, like really only helps you in the end. Like I'm just sitting here thinking about that. Like how many people have we met on these podcasts that have like given us different things to think about or like a different way to look at things, like the morning mantra, like all these different things that like in my world of wine probably would not have been open to me like if we hadn't started to do these podcasts, and you're like giving that like a physical place to go. I just think that's really neat
Thanks. Yeah,
to
I
be
think
able to facilitate that.
Yeah, I think at the very least, like you'll have a great evening and have your way of thinking about things expanded, like you said. And then I think in its very best form, you'll either end up doing a really cool project or getting hired by someone at the dinner. So there's and it's very like if the very least you get from it is a wonderful dinner where you had all these interesting conversations, like that to me is worth it. I love dinner
It's
parties.
still a win.
Yeah, it's still
Yeah.
a win. And then at its best capacity and the biggest capacity is you get hired for something where you can actually make money and get a really cool work opportunity. And we've seen that happen a lot as well. And so it feels like there's really no way to lose out. Like it's a curated networking event. We chose you for it for a reason. So we always tell people like when you're invited, like we thought about that. It wasn't just like, oh, buy a ticket to this thing. It's like, no, we really want you in the room because we think you're a good fit. And sometimes people don't realize that is like a preface. And there are times where we put stories up and we're like, hey, we're looking for someone for this dinner. Like, let us know if you're interested. But we still talk to them ahead of time. It's not like anyone just shows up at the event. Um, so yeah, it's really it's cool to watch it unfold and it's fun too. Sometimes people will be doing really cool things that have come to a dinner and then we'll comment being like, this is so cool. And they're like, we met at the maker's table. And we're like, wait, you did? Like, we didn't even know that happened. So it's so satisfying for Alex and I to get that feedback from people. And like I said, the proof of concept, because I think it's one of those things where we're always like, is this working? Are people enjoying this? Because sometimes it is just a lot of work and you don't know how people feel about it. But whenever we hear that, it's so satisfying and reminds us how important it is.
Well, just general face-to-face interaction, especially in environments where you can share a meal, I think makes people a little bit more open and vulnerable and allows a format that is so much more human
I agree.
than taking a call or being forced to network for an hour and like during a cocktail hour or something like that. So I think that you literally set the table, no pun intended, for earnest, honest conversation. And Rach, I really love your comparison to what we try to do on strategy sessions, because from the very outset of this podcast, I mean, have intentionally invited guests on the podcast that aren't in really the wine industry in particular, but wine and hospitality. We always are looking outside of industry for those vantage points that will allow us to think differently about the day-to-day work that we do. And it's hard. It's hard when you have your group, your industry group or your peer group, to force yourself to look outside of your safe space. And so you are facilitating that in many of the similar ways that we try to facilitate it through this medium. in podcasts. So yeah, I think it really hits home for us too. And I love what you said too about casting a wide net. I mean, I think it's important to try to cast that wide net, put yourself out there, and you'll learn a lot more about yourself in the process.
Definitely. So for people that are listening, that are building businesses, creative projects, communities of their own, what's one mindset or practice that you feel like they can adopt to make collaboration more meaningful, like just in their work and in their lives too in general? Because this bleeds into real life and relationships and all kinds of stuff.
Um, Alex and I talk about this a lot, and I wrote about it in my book as well. But I think as Americans specifically, we are raised in this country with this concept of like fierce independence. And I'm actually a very independent person and tend to not be super collaborative, which is funny because I care and I'm so passionate about it. But um, I mean, depending on when you went to school, you might have even been saying like the Pledge of Allegiance in the classroom where you literally talk about being independent, like one nation under God, independent, like all this stuff, right? So it's sort of this subconscious thing that Americans specifically have of like bootstraps, do it yourself, like figure it out, make it work. But when I was studying art history, and specifically like the Renaissance, it was a very collaborative time period and there were these guilds and like all these things going on and it was really a amazing time and it's the golden age of art, right? And it's when we believe human history had like the most amazing contributions to the world. And so I I just really argue like you have to stop being so independent and so hard-headed that you're not willing to work with other people. So I think the mindset that people really need to adopt is a collaborative mindset of just being open to asking for help, asking people for ideas, asking people what they think about what you're doing, inviting people in who have more expertise than you or a different perspective than you, and being really willing to receive that. Um, and there's a piece of letting your ego go, which is really hard, um, because you want to be right and you want to do it and you want to take all the credit. But I think to be successful in collaborating, you have to be willing to like give other people the credit. And I think that's something that is hard when you're ingrained as like an independent person in a society that values independence. So, specifically for Americans, I would challenge them to like be a little more communal with your stuff. Like whatever it is that you're doing, invite more people in, ask more people what they think. And try to let go of some of that independence because I think it actually does make you stronger and more successful when you know you can't do it all by yourself.
I think that there's also, this lesson is learned the hard way for a lot of entrepreneurs, just in general. They may start with the best idea in the world, and if they're not appropriately funded, or even if they are funded well, they can't do it alone a lot of times. And so I think that when you are in a startup mentality or you are building a business that's your own, I think very quickly you realize that there are absolutely power in numbers. And the wider the network you can build, the relationships you can forge, and the collaborative environment that you can set in front of yourself, the better chance you have for success. And I would imagine, right? I mean, a lot of the guests that you have through Maker's Table are entrepreneurs or that's their own business, owner operators, right?
Yeah, of course, there's like tons of people, but tons of entrepreneurs, tons of independent business owners, or people who in their artistic practice, it's like a one-man show. So like they might like there's a mural artist who's come and he says he usually paints alone and he's like it's so nice to sit and talk to other creatives and it just changes my mindset about my own art even though I'm the independent artist. And so I think we're trying to really create a space where no matter how independent you are, you can see the value in building community, and building a creative community that can be supportive, even if it's not in actually making whatever you make. Like sometimes it is a one man job, but having that community to bounce ideas off of and be re inspired is really important. And the only way you get sort of new ideas and new inspiration is from encountering something new. So if you never get out of your routine or your community or your friend group, like you're never going to encounter something totally new. And so that's kind of what we hope with the dinners is like, you may never have talked to a puzzle maker before, but now you have, and you've all of a sudden expanded what you think your business can do because you met someone who does something totally different.
Now you just wrapped what you just had one recently, right? A few weeks ago. And is there another one on the horizon?
Yes, we have one coming up that is a little bit non-traditional, so I'm actually not going to talk about that one because I don't want to confuse people. But after that, we're doing a wellness focused dinner, and so that one will actually not have any alcohol, which is always fun. But we it's focused on the golden ratio was kind of where we derived the idea from. And so a lot of like Renaissance-y stuff. I'm always trying to infuse the Italian Renaissance into our dinners whenever I can. And so the golden ratio talks about like in art and nature, there's this like harmonious balance. And we're
Fibonacci, right?
talking,
Fibonacci sequence. Is that what
yeah,
that is?
it all has to do with that, like Leonardo da Vinci, all of it. And so the idea behind this dinner, we're calling it the golden rule, which also plays off of like just being kind and all of that. And so the idea is how does your work and your art affect your wellness, and how does your wellness affect your work and your art, and this kind of play into that. And so far we have there's a yoga instructor who's going to lead a flow. We have someone who's going to do a sound bath for all the guests. We have a couple really cool chefs who are really excited to explore like what it means for food to make you well, not just eating healthy, but also like being nourishing and what that means. And so I'm really excited for this dinner because the wellness dinners are always kind of cool because it can get a little woo woo, but it's interesting to see people who aren't directly in the wellness industry, how they translate their art and skills into a wellness focus. And so, um, some of the chefs had some really interesting concepts that they were talking about. So I'm excited to see how this unfolds.
Well, that's really cool.
That's
And
cool.
is that the first one that you guys have done that have been health and wellness focused?
No, this is our third wellness focus. So, this we're in our third year now. So we try to do one wellness dinner a year because, and hopefully more as we grow, because every time we do a dinner with a theme in a specific industry, we end up getting a ton of people applying from that industry because they find out about the Maker's Table. So then we are like, we have to do another one for this industry for all these new applicants. So we do just like more general creative dinners. Like the last one we did in March was we had someone, this was so cool. She did like surprise opera. So she just like stood up during the dinner and started singing opera, and everyone was like, "Oh my God." And she was amazing, and it was so cool. And there's just things like that that people contribute, and it just blows your mind. And someone was literally crying because it was so beautiful. I mean, it's just like the way people can share their art and contribute to an evening is so amazing. And Alex and I don't come up with these ideas. Like we just facilitate it. So a lot of times people are like, you did such a great job. I'm like, no, you all did. Like you all made this happen. We just kind of hold the container for it. So um I'm rambling a little bit, but like it's just such a neat
Well,
thing
it's the
what people
magic
come up
though.
with.
We talked
Yeah.
about it earlier, right? I mean, it's the magic of these dinners that you set the table and then you just let the guests create the magic, which is again, I think which makes them so special. So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and every dinner is so different too. So it's kind of fun. Like Alex and I love debriefing after dinners to like see what went well, what we think could have gone better, what surprised us, what connections we saw happening. So it's just like a really cool. It's cool how every single dinner is so different based on who comes because everyone is offering something different every time. And so there's like no reality where you could have the same dinner happen again. It's just literally impossible. And so that there's something really special about and I'll get it like I can get really lofty with some of this, but there's something really cool about how fleeting the dinner itself is because it's sort of a one-time experience that can never be recreated. We do the same concept over and over, but like it will never be the same because there's it's very unlikely that you'll get all of those people back in the same room at the same time again, making all the same things. So it's a really special thing.
Rach, I mean, that's hospitality, right? I mean, that's what
Hmm.
we talk about. We talk about in so many of these sessions is that we're all in the business of experience, and if you can create this residual effect to somebody, so that they are thinking about it a month from now, a year from now, and the people that they were with, right? Every moment in time is special, and again, that's what makes face-to-face interaction so powerful, quite frankly.
Hmm.
And you're just providing another really ultra creative vehicle for people to experience these moments. And you're clearly doing your job because they're leaving and they're thinking about it and they're connecting with people after the fact. So you are certainly speaking our language, Sid, when you
Yeah,
talk about that.
hospitality is really important to Alex and I, and um we just want to make people feel seen and valued, and we want to give them like a space where, because a lot of times creating art, and when you're running your own business for it, and I'm sure you guys experience this, it can sometimes like kill the creativity. Like I don't know exactly how it might translate to wine, but like if you're so passionate about a specific bottle, but that's not what they want you to sell, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, I have to focus on selling this wine that I'm not as excited about. So for the people coming to our dinners, it's really cool because we always say there's no rules. You can make whatever you want. It doesn't have to be good. If you want to try something that you've never tried before, you can do that too. And if it flops, it's a very low stakes thing. And if it's really successful, now you know, and you've gotten to share it with people and get feedback. Like it's a playground for your art that there's no rules, there's no consumer in the traditional sense. Like you're not beholden to anyone's expectations. And so I think it also helps people reignite why they do the things they do, because there's no like capitalist agenda behind it. It's literally like you're making this to share with 20 people who are also making something to share with you. And so there's a little bit of like a purity in that sense where it's like purely for creative reasons and that's it. And then what's cool, like, and I mentioned in the beginning, like Alex and I, when we do get opportunities for hire, we try to bring people in, hire them, and that's a little bit different. But the dinners, like the community dinners themselves are just about creating art for art's sake, and there's really nothing beyond that.
I love
Beautiful.
that. I love
It's
that.
so, yeah, it is beautiful. I love it.
Well, amped up, man. I want to do one, Sid. Sign me
Yeah,
up. Just
I know. We got to
don't
get you guys into a dinner as soon as possible.
I would love to
And you
do
can share
one.
whatever wine you're excited
We
about,
don't need
not
to
what you're
bring
being
wine.
told.
We can get collaborative without wine. It's not a
Mhm.
crutch. Right?
Yeah.
Well, Sydney, it's been awesome talking with you. Always enjoyed these chats. We've had an opportunity to connect a couple times prior to this, and it's just we're big fans of what you're doing, and we
Thank
can't wait to
you.
see what's next as the website continues to get
I know, we
updated.
can't wait to see what's next either. We're like figuring a lot out as we go. But thank you guys for creating a platform for people. I think it's really important for people who are doing cool stuff to have a place to talk about it. And I deeply appreciate you guys having us on for take 2.
Yeah, of course.
And making
No
it work.
problem.
But yeah, thanks for sharing our story and helping get us out there.
Well, there you have it, guys. This weekend, maybe cook a meal and invite some friends over and have a dinner party and see what magic unfolds. Or if not, check it out and read about it through the Maker's Table. That's going to do it for this episode of Strategy Sessions. As always, we appreciate you guys sticking around and listening to us, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for Strategy Sessions. Please like, follow, share, and subscribe at Thirsty Bandit Co.